Hello friends and welcome to this video introduction to Jim's next project, which will be the deepening of the PAPs of the Pacific Theater of Operations, PTO, brought to the Advanced Squad Leader system through the Rising Sun module. This module brings some peculiarities, with which we are dealing with the use of Starter Kit 4, which deals with this theater of operations, with simplified and accessible rules. However, the time has come for a greater depth, with the ultimate objective of playing the Gavutu Tanambogo campaign, included in the Rising Sun module. However, to achieve this objective, a deeper study of several aspects involved with this campaign will be necessary. To fulfill the objective, some themes stand out as fundamental, among which stand out the Seaborne Assault, night battles, off-board artillery, air support, defensive positions, such as pillboxes, foxholes, trenches, bunkers, minefields, among others. For each of these topics, Jim will produce one or more videos, as needed, going deeper into the issues. For that, we will use as reference material, in addition to the rulebook, articles from publications dedicated to the Advanced Squad Leader, such as general magazines, annual and journal, View from the Trenches and Bonsai, among other sources. Whenever possible, the rules will be cited explicitly, for cross-reference. To start this epic achievement, let's start with the amphibious assault on beaches. As material we will use, in addition to the rulebook, the articles, Hit the Beaches Running by Greg Storr in View from the Trenches Volume 21, September 1998, and Getting Your Feet Wet by John Neal in ASL Journal Volume 9. Enjoy. So, you always wanted to play maritime assault scenario? I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a rules guru, I'm just trying to bring beach landing to the masses. The only way to learn these rules is to take a few counters and push them against a worthy opponent. I hope this article gives you a boost in that direction. This video ignores maritime evacuation rules. We will also skip all rules regarding air attacks on landing craft, LC. Great doll. As we are not going to deal with crossing rivers and canals, we will skip the issues related to boats and go directly to the units involved in invasions from the ocean, more specifically, the landing vehicles, LC, and amphibious vehicles. Amphibious vehicles are any vehicles with movement point printing amphibian superscript and are described in Rule D16.0. However, a DD tank is only an amphibian if its screens are in place, Rule D16.1. Landing craft are specifically defined in Rule G12.0. The list includes the LCP, L, LCVP, LCA, LCM, 3, LCT, 4, and LCI, 5, which are US/British, Daihatsu and Shohotsu, which are Japanese types. A watercraft is defined as any LC, boat, or amphibian. You don't have to worry about rowing your LC, since the boat rules from Chapter A do not apply. Each LC has an inherent crew, that is always crew exposed, CE, and always has a morale level of 8. If the portage points, PP, are underlined, the LCs have a ramp. This is important if you plan on transporting any vehicles, as vehicles need a ramp for loading and unloading. The ocean, the beach, and hinterland. The ocean is simple, it's this big, blue thing. It is defined as open terrain level, -1. Smoke cannot be placed there, however it can occur there if generated by a fire of an LC, or a wreck on board an LC. Smoke can also drift into an ocean hex. Otherwise, you won't find smoke in the ocean. An ocean hex itself can be deep or shallow. By default, it is considered deep. The ocean will only be considered shallow if it lies within 3 hexes of a gently sloping beach. It lies within 2 hexagons with a moderately sloping beach. It is adjacent to a beach with a steep slope. It is located between a submerged reef and the coast. If there is no beach hex, it follows the pattern and is considered deep. So how do you know the slope of the beach? The scenario's special rules define the slope of the beach as light, moderate, or steep, Rule G13.2. In addition to determining the number of shallow ocean hexes, beach slope affects expenditure of movement factors and movement points, and terrain modifying effects, TEM. A gently sloping beach doesn't have a crest line, so it doesn't affect line of sight or movement when moving from the beach to the interior hex. A moderately sloping beach has the same line of sight as a gently sloping beach. Movement through a beach/hinterland hex is also unaffected. The only change is that all beach hexes are treated as being the same level. A steeply sloping beach is treated as a -1 level hex. Thus, the hex between the beach and the hinterland is considered a crest line. Units will pay the normal cost of moving to higher terrain when crossing these beach/hinterland hexes. Infantry can also gain crest status along these hexes. In addition to having a slope, a beach hex will also contain hard or soft sand, such as defined in Chapter F. A beach hex will be considered hard sand if the environmental conditions are wet, muddy, or snowy. Or, if the beach hex is adjacent to an ocean hex and does not have a steep slope. Everything else is soft sand. Either type will affect movement, off-board artillery fire, as well as causing certain bogs. The soft sand also has the firepower of area/infantry target type shots. With high explosives, heat, and off-board artillery. Any vehicle that enters or changes the arc of vehicular coverage in a beach hex will incur a bog check. Any dice roll with a final result of greater than or equal to 12 will stall the vehicle, from which the following modifiers apply. -1 per hex of hard sand beach. +2 for high ground pressure. +1 normal ground pressure. +1 half tracks or without caterpillars. +1 per span truck movement point and greater than or equal to 4 tons and non-British built. -1 ambient conditions are humid or muddy. Whenever there is no beach between the ocean and interior hexes, a crest line exists across the side of the hex where the ocean and hinterland meet. Crest line rules apply, Rule B21.2, and when units are moving from the LC to the hinterland, they will pay double the normal costs for unloading. If you are defending against a beach attack, remember that beach obstacles can only be set up on beach or shallow ocean hexes. Nothing can be configured in deep ocean hexes. Terrain hexes not belonging to the beach are referred to as hinterland hexes. Another definition that will come in handy when shooting starts is very large target. This refers to any target vehicle or weapon whose target size is 0, -1, or -2. Loading the landing vehicles, LC. The first thing you're going to need to do is load up the LC of yours with everything you can fit into it. The front of each LC meter has a number of portage points, pp. This is the maximum amount that can be loaded into the LC. If pp allows, multiple vehicles can be stacked in LC without overstacking penalties. Passengers, including vehicles that are LC passengers, do not count towards stacking limits, G12.15, therefore they cannot be overloaded, as long as they are LC passengers. Once you start unloading an LC, the exit location can become overstacked, as it is possible to have a vehicle other than a passenger on board an LC at the same location as an LC. Portage points equivalents are listed in Rule D6.1. Squad equals 10 pp. HS/crew equals 5 pp. Less than 4 SMC equals 0 pp. 5 SMC will equal 1 HS. Support weapons equals normal pp cost. Every support weapon that can be dismantled should be. Also note that dismantled mortars require 0 pp. The LC portability table in Chapter G is shown below and states the cost of loading various weapons and vehicles into the LC. You will also find some useful information about loading LC in the notes to Chapter H. You must distribute your forces among your ships. A vessel with portability points capacity can only come into play if greater than or equal to 2/3 of that capacity is occupied by units and passengers. If the watercraft is carrying a vehicle, a non-DM gun, it only needs to be 1/2 full. You don't need to place passengers on the game board until it's time to unload. Keep them on the camouflage sheet until disembarkation, at which point all your passengers and units will be placed on board stacked on their LC counter. An amphibian's passengers are revealed once the amphibian enters a hinterland hex or they unbutton. In fact, any loss can happen right out of the cloak box without informing your opponent, unless your opponent needs to keep track of the victory points. Even then you only need to tell him the total loss of victory points. Each vessel has 2 stacks of passengers, an infantry stack, and a vehicle stack. The unit on top of the stack, or near the top of the cloak box, is considered the one in front. The order is very important for 2 reasons. 1. The vehicle stack unloads from front to back. 2. If any vehicle on board takes a hit, it will require you to remove the wreckage using Rules D10.4 before any vehicle behind it can unload. One way to free up some space on the LC is to load support personnel or weapons onto whatever vehicle would normally carry them on land. Portage points from that support personnel or weapon do not count towards the LC total. An empty truck takes up as much space as a full truck. However, if you have loaded personnel into vehicles, they will be in the vehicle stack, not the infantry pile. In addition to personnel counters, all motorcycles, horses, boats, and push guns are in the infantry pile. Towed guns belong in the vehicle stack. Before the game starts, you may deploy as many passengers as you wish, without regard to normal deployment limits or any leader test checks. Once the game begins, you are allowed to reorganize the infantry pile just like you would in an open field hex. It is not possible to rearrange the vehicle stack. There just isn't enough space on any LC to be driving vehicles. While on board the LC for your short 3-hour cruise, passengers are only allowed to unhook cannons, but they cannot hook them, transfer or retrieve support weapons, and perform resolution morale checks. Personnel on board an LC may also mount and dismount vehicles that are also on board the LC, becoming passengers of a passenger on the vessel, with no extra charge for the movement of the LC. Moving the LC and amphibians. Each water obstacle hex will require a movement point expenditure. If the vessel has two movement points printed in the upper right corner of the counter, the larger one is the MP used on land, and the smaller, superscript one is used in water. The inherent LC crew will steer your boat to get you where you want to go. These guys are defined as inexperienced. If those two are piloting your LC, you'll have to subtract an MP from the printed value. Typical MP costs for a landing vehicle. An LC is considered non-stop unless it is beach, immobilized, or expanded a stop movement point. An LC is considered in motion unless it is immobilized/aground. Normally a vehicle is immobile when shocked, or stunned, but LCs are never shocked and are still considered mobile if stunned. On a river, the LC will drift normally, Rule B21.121. In an ocean, the LC will only drift in heavy surf, 1 hex toward shore on. Advance phase. When an LC enters a shallow ocean hex, while approaching a beach, they must make a bob DR, which occurs before any beach/stop declare/attempt, as well as before the defensive first shot. Modifiers include the bob DRM on the LC counter, the plus hashtag just to the left of the printed MP. +1 if the hex contains wire, unless the LC size is -3 or -4. If the bob DR greater than or equal to 12, it runs aground in the hex, not across one of the hex sides like beaching. An LC can try to clear this bogged state, called aground at start of its movement phase, provided it did not fire in the prep fire phase, and provided it has no passengers to unload. A single dice roll is made with the following modifiers. Dice roll less than or equal to 4, LC is free, the number of movement points to start is equal to the die result, using reverse movement. DR equals 5, LC is mired, +1 added to future intentions. DR greater than or equal to 6, LC is completely grounded, fast aground, and immobilized. Die modifier equals +1 if already mired. Note rule G13.4222 which talks about a swamping dice roll when entering a shallow ocean location. But this only applies to a non-waterproof vehicle that is waiting in place. Rule G13.4222 which talks about a swamping dice roll when an amphibian is always considered waterproof, Rule G13.4221, and is exempt from swamping. Also note that Rule G13.4221 specifically states that LC are not considered to be wading in a shallow ocean location, so they are exempt as well. In fact, the only time we'll see flooding will be when the heavy DERV are in effect or you have some non-waterproof vehicles. LC is also authorized to use platoon movement like AFVs with radios. 2 or 3 LCs can move in one truss as long as they are adjacent to each other. When using squad movement, they only need to do one bob DR when running aground, instead of one for each LC. Amphibians are also very easy to move around in the move phase. Simply use the land movement rate when on land and the amphibious rate when in an aquatic hex. They can even use a combination of their amphibious and ground moves in the same movement phase. However, if the vehicle has 2 amphibious movement points, it loses half of its ground movement points for each amphibious MP used, and vice versa. For vehicles with 3 amphibious movement points, the ground Northern Mariana Islands loss is 1/3 for every amphibious MP spent, and vice versa. Using up to half of ground's movement points causes the loss of 1 amphibious MP. Amphibians are always considered waterproof, G 13.4221. Because they are considered waterproof, they only need to pay 3 land MPE for each hex of shallow ocean. The cost is 4 MPE for non-waterproof vehicles. Amphibians must control a bulk check when moving from water obstacle to land hexes, but only if that terrain hex is an interior hex. If they have to check bulk, it's done as if leaving a stream hex. Landing craft beach-like boats across any ocean beach or ocean hinterland hex site, Rule G12.3. The owning player declares beaching when entering the ocean hex that is adjacent to the beach/hinterland hex by moving the LC forward to straddle the appropriate hex site. The LC is still considered to be in the water obstacle, but unloading units will be placed in the beach/hinterland hex, if able. Normal vehicle and loading rules apply to LC and their passengers. Units may unload across the beach hex site at a cost of 25% of their MF/MP allotment, plus cost of terrain, if it is a vehicle. If unloading to a higher elevation, the percent cost is doubled or increased by 4 MPE for vehicles. If unloading from a LC without a ramp, the normal 25% and loading cost is increased to 50%. While on the beach, infantry are considered fanatic if conducting a seaborne assault/evacuation, Rule G14.32. This is great, but the downside is that any break result causes casualty reduction. If your units leave the LC, or are forced from it, for any reason, while in a shallow water hex, they are considered to be wading, Rule G13.42. While wading, infantry expend 3 MF per shallow water location, and are unable to form multi-location fire group. The attacks against them are half, but they can only attack with area fire. Any break result again means casualty reduction, while leadership modifiers are NA. However, a wading unit, if designated as part of a seaborne assault/evacuation, is fanatic. Vehicles are also allowed to wade, whether amphibious or not. If the vehicle is considered non-waterproofed, check scenario, special rules, then it has to make a swamping dice roll if it enters a shallow ocean hex. A DIA of 12 or more results in immobilization of that vehicle. This DIA can be modified according to how close the vehicle is to the shore, CJ, Rule 13.4222. There is also the prospect of finding a seawall, Rule G13.6, along a few beach/hinterland hex sites. It will be defined as either high or low. If high, a seawall is the same as a one-level cliff and can only be climbed by commandos. A low seawall is more common and is similar in most respects to a normal wall. It is different in 2 major respects, however. First, a unit crossing from a hinterland hex to a beach hex does not need to expand 1 MF, although it still would if going in the opposite direction. Second, loss is not blocked by a wall as it normally would be, if neither the firers nor the target shared the wall hex site. In such cases, a +1 TEM is applied to fire that crosses such a seawall hex site. In summary, landing craft, LC. It's considered in motion/non-stop in water obstacle unless beach, immobilizers or ground. Inherent crew, with 8 morale and are always considered crew, exposed and qualify for a +2 modifier when fired upon. Only LC with a ramp can transport vehicles, guns, or horses. LC's passengers have a morale of 8, regardless of printed moral, and are immune to pin test check, leader loss morale check, leader loss test check, or heat of battle results. Any break is considered casualty reduction, Rule G12.12. Stacking order on an LC, usually done on the cloaking display, is important. The top of the stack signifies the front of the LC, so units must leave in that order upon landing. This also means that a vehicle at the top or front of a stack, if destroyed or immobilized, can block other vehicles or guns from leaving the LC, G12.151. LC expand 1 movement point per hex spine when changing vehicular covered arc. LC can only prep fire and defensive, first, fire if fast aground and crewed, GL 2.5. Otherwise, LC can only fire as bounding, first, fire. Thus, their fire is usually quartered, and any passengers aboard can't attack at all. LC differ from normal vehicles in that each has a damage point, DP, rating. This number, on the rear of the counter, is the limit of how much damage LC can take before being eliminated. When LC are hit, damage is expressed in an amount of DP lost. Once the DP rating for LC is equaled in damage points, the LC is immobilized. If the DP rating is exceeded, the LC is eliminated. If this occurs in deep water, all passengers and crew are eliminated. If in shallow water, the crew can survive normally, while passengers face any applicable collateral attack, and if they survive, are placed above the LC red counter and are in a beach LC. Alright friends, with this huge quantum of information, Jim will close this clip at this point. For the next clip, Jim will bring out the mechanisms related to possible attacks against the landing crafts and amphibious, and all the related consequences. Hope to see you soon. Namaste. Hello friends, welcome to the second part of this series, that addresses the rules and issues, specifically related to mechanics, that govern the use of landing crafts, LC, and amphibious vehicles. In the first episode, the rules for moving and loading/unloading these units were addressed. In this episode, we will go through the rules involved with the possibilities of attacks and the damage caused by watercrafts. As support for these videos, we are using the excellent articles by Greg Dahl in the publication View from the Trenches number 21, entitled Get the Beaches Running, and the article Getting Your Feet Wet by John Neal, the Advanced Squad Leader, Journal Volume 9. In addition to combat-related issues, an important variable associated with movement and landing craft landing mechanics that was not addressed in the first video, which is high surf, will be detailed in this episode. Enjoy. Heavy surf. Sometimes you must face heavy surf. Rule G13.44. Heavy surf, its variables, that will mostly make it more difficult for your forces to get ashore in an orderly fashion, and in some cases, it can create downright hazardous conditions. In heavy surf, all vehicles face possible swamping, G13.441, whether they are waterproofed or not. A swamping dice roll, DR, is made for each vehicle during its movement phase. A dice roll, DR, of 12 or more results in the watercraft being sunk if in deep ocean or immobilized if in shallow water. Your opponent makes a secret dice roll, DR, also. The secret dice roll, DR, determines the hex in the vehicle's line of movement in which this happens. Obviously, it is better for you if swamping happens in shallow water, as your passengers might then be able to get out and wait, although they'll be CX the whole time they are in shallow water. Swamping is not the only problem you face in heavy surf. It could be notoriously difficult to navigate a flat-bottom LC in rough seas, particularly as it neared the shore. Rule G13.442 and G13.4422 reflects this difficulty. Whenever your LC begins its movement phase, advance phase, in a water obstacle, with at least one beachable hex site, either ocean beach or ocean hinterland, or if it moves into such a hex in either of those phases, it must make a beaching or unbeaching dice roll, DR. Note that during heavy surf, this can occur in the advance phase. A +1 DRM applies to this DR for each of the following cases. Inexperienced LC crew, by SSR. Being adjacent to a hinterland location, a steeply sloped beach, or a non-beach island. Being in the same hex as another LC. A DR equals 8 means that your LC is able to beach. However, the beaching hex site is randomly determined if more than one possibility exists. This can do much to affect the coordination of your landing, particularly if it creates LC overstacking issues. A DR of 9 or 10 makes the LC temporarily immobilized, TI, and ends any further action for the remainder of that player term, including loading, unloading passengers. Such a result also beaches a LC if it is unbeached, or unbeaches it if it is beached. If its ramp is down at the time, it is fast aground if in shallow water, or sunk if in deep. A DR of 11 or more means that the LC has broached, Rule G13.4421. Broaching will wreck the LC, which is flipped over and immediately considered to be beached. The crew roll, for survival, and the passengers, both vehicles and infantry, are subjected to a 2 morale check in the same way as they would be if under bombardment. There are a few other heavy surf effects. First, loading and unloading costs are doubled during heavy surf, G13.443. This is obvious when one imagines infantry trying to get off an LC while it is buffeted up and down, left and right, by crashing waves. Second, LC are subject to drift in the advance phase, while heavy surf is in effect, G13.445. Each LC is moved one hex closer to the shore, randomly determined, if required, and may then be forced to undertake a beaching doctor. Last, and the only real positive, any attack against an LC in an ocean hex during heavy surf receives a +1 DRM for to hit an infantry fire table, affects DR, G13.445. It's harder to hit an LC that's being thrown all over the place. Shooting at the LC. Perhaps the most confusing area in the entire chapter G rules is the plethora of rules concerning attacks against LC innocuously called non-CC attacks versus LC. However, these rules are actually quite simple and follow the rest of the rulebook logic. First, you must determine if you manage to hit anything, then you must determine what you've hit. Next, you must determine how much damage you have done to what you've hit. Finally, you need to determine if any other damage has been done. The only new step is the second one, determining what has been hit. This is a result of having multiple vehicles and infantry passengers on the LC. As we will see, some attacks are more likely to hit everyone, whereas other types of attacks will only hit one item. Have you hit? The first thing to do when shooting at a LC or amphibian is to get a hit. This is done in the same way you attempt to hit any vehicle. You must announce what type of ammunition you're using, AP or HE, and what target type you're going to use, vehicle or area. You cannot target the passengers of a LC separately from the LC. Whether you hit or damage any of the passengers is strictly up to the dice gods. An amphibious vehicle in a water obstacle is always in motion unless stunned or shocked. A stunned or shocked amphibian in a water obstacle must expend an amphibious MP in its current hex to start movement again. Thus, all ordnance attempts versus a wading, i.e., amphibians but not landing craft, vehicle receive an extra target-based +2 DRM. Non-ordnance attacks can be made against either armored or non-armored LCs. If the LC is armored, the crew will be entitled to a +2 crew exposed dice roll modifier when attacked. The only other passenger, PRC, to be attacked will be unarmored large targets. If the LC is not armored, it can be attacked on the star vehicle line. The crew, this time with no crew exposed dice roll modifier, infantry passengers, and non-AFV vehicles, will also be attacked. If the final dice roll attack versus the LC is less than or equal to the number on the star vehicle line of the IFT. For ordnance attacks, if your original to hit dice roll resulted in a hit, there are three possible items that could have been hit: the LC hull, the LC superstructure, or a large target passenger. If the colored die is greater than or equal to the white die, the LC received the hull hit, which will affect both the LC and possibly some of the passengers with collateral attack. If the colored die is less than the white die, the LC superstructure was hit, which will affect both the LC and possibly its crew. However, if there are large targets aboard the LC, it is possible that one of these large targets was hit instead of the LC superstructure. A random selection is made, reroll any dice, to determine who was hit. One of the large targets, or the LC superstructure. If the to hit missed by one and the colored die was less than the white die, and there are large target passengers on board, one of the large targets aboard the LC was hit, random selection again. The major difference between LCs and other watercraft/vehicles is that LC can take damage points without necessarily being destroyed. Because of this, rules are needed to determine hit location and resolve collateral attacks. For other watercraft, the target is either eliminated or not, and passengers survive accordingly. There are three items on any landing craft that can be affected by securing a hit on a landing craft: the crew, the passengers, and the LC itself. Effects of the hit on the crew. If elevation is greater than range, no crew exposed dice roll modifier is received. All LC crews are considered to have a morale level of 8. Any attack that influences a LC crew will result in a stun. LC crews are immune to all task checks and leader loss morale checks. They are also not subject to any pin or heat of battle results. Any attack that would normally result in breaking the crew or recalling Rule D 5.34, the LC is treated as a stun result instead. Any sniper attack also results in a stun. The LC whose crew receives a stun result does not stop. However, if it is not beached/immobilized, the attacker immediately makes a random direction dice roll for the LC and repositions it within its present hex so that the randomly determined hex site lies within its vehicular cover arc. If the stun occurs during the LC's movement phase, it is then assumed to have expended all its remaining movement points, if any, in that new phasing. Although it can be stunned, these results do not lead to recall if they normally would in Rule D 5.34. All stun results are cumulative. That will make a difference if the crew ever tries to shoot any of those weapons, since the stun results will act like there was an armor leader aboard the LC and add the modifier to any shot it takes. The stun results will also be added to any crew survival roll if the LC is destroyed in shallow water, Rule G 12.691. If a LC is destroyed in shallow ocean, normal survival rules will apply to the LC crew. The LC crew that survives separately from the LC becomes a 126 vehicle crew that is inexperienced in all aspects except firing a MG, commonly known as the Gilligan factor. Effects of the heat on passengers. LC passengers are considered buttoned up through their /the LC's armored target facings, and they can never be crew exposed. Through an armored target facing, you normally can do not shoot directly at any LC passengers. They are not even a valid sniper target, although the LC crew is. While aboard a LC, personnel passengers, even those inside a vehicle which is a passenger of a LC, are immune to immobilization test check, pin test check, leader loss morale check, leader loss test check and booby trap attacks, and are not subject to pin or heat of battle results. Leadership modifiers may not be applied either. All personnel and inherent crew passengers aboard a LC are considered to have a morale level of 8, even those whose morale is 9 or 10. If a MC results in a break or stat reduction, if Japanese, the unit is subjected to casualty reduction instead. Any amphibian eliminated in a water obstacle is considered sunk and leaves no wreck. The crew/passengers of a sunk amphibian are automatically eliminated, Rule D 16.5, with no chance for survival. A vehicle aboard a LC can be turned into a burning wreck in the normal manner for whatever type of attack strikes it. Effects of the heat on the LC. Each LC has a damage point, DP, rating on the wreck side of its counter. When the DP total equals the LC's DP rating, it is immobilized. When that rating is exceeded, the LC is destroyed. If it is destroyed in deep water, it sinks just like the Titanic and everything on it is lost. If destroyed in shallow water, it is flipped to its wreck side and is considered beach. Normal survival rules apply to the inherent crew. Remember to add any accumulated stun results to the survival DR. Passengers remain LC passengers and are subject to the normal collateral effects of the attack, if any, that destroyed their LC. If they survive the collateral attack, personnel are placed on top of the LC wreck and treat the LC as if it just beached. Vehicles of the same except they are considered bogged. All unpossessed SW are lost. LCs are not affected by shock, possible shock, or the immobilization resulting from a TKDR equals TK hashtag. The automatic stun that is usually a result of a MG fire versus an armored target, rule D5.34, does not occur when shooting at an armored LC. LCs can also be set afire by any attack that inflicts at least 2 DP and the colored die from that attack is a 1. Place a blaze counter on the LC with a pin counter. At the end of the next close combat phase, remove the pin counter. From that point on, the LC's movement point allotment is reduced by 1. Also, during each advanced fire phase, 1 damage point is inflicted on the LC. Indirect fire still has its place against LC, rule G12.63, OBA/area target type. Although you might not get a lot of opportunities to use OBA, nearly every defending force on a beach will have a mortar or 2. A mortar fires on the area target type, and if a hit is achieved against a fully armored LC, it is resolved on the IFT using the rule C1.55 dice roll modifiers. Since nearly every LC has low armor factors and all are open top, you can assume there will usually be a -2 DRM to this attack dice roll. A kill in action, KIA, results in a damage points loss to the LC of an amount equal to the KIA number. AK/hashtag only has the effect of a collateral attack against the vulnerable PRC. If the LC is even partially unarmored, it is attack on the asterisk vehicle. Line of the infantry target type. We'll now consider the ramifications of the above in a few short examples, hopefully highlighting the effect of various weapons against LC. Let's start with a German medium machine gun, MMG, crew in a pillbox looking out to sea, somewhere in Normandy. An LCVP appears in the distance, probably no more than a few hundred meters away. Let's say 12 hexes, which is the normal range of the MMG. What would be the best course of action for the crew to take? Well, if they get jittery and fire, only a lucky shot will do much damage. Let's see why. A MMG can fire at both armored and unarmored vehicles. If armored, it is firing AP and uses the normal C3 to hit process. An LCVP in 1944 is an armored vehicle. It is thus treated as an vehicle. It is thus treated as an armored fire vehicle. A hit must first be achieved on the C3 to hit table. We'll assume this has happened, even at that distance. What does AP do to LC? As we've noted, it's not nearly as effective as we'd like to think. AP rounds can quite easily pass through a LC without doing much damage to it. In this case, as stated above, we can see that unless we roll half of the 2 kill number, we aren't going to damage the LC at all. The TK hashtag is 4, so we must roll snake eyes, double 1, just to cause damage. Even then, if we do roll so low, we will only inflict 1 damage point. If we could get a critical hit, the damage point would be increased by 1, G12.64, but MGs can't get critical hits. We will do no more damage unless we maintain ROF and are just as lucky a second or third time. We might be better off waiting for the LC to beach and unload, so we can do some damage to those vulnerable Tommies or GIs when they are on foot. For example, when the ram is down, attacks through the front facing of a LC are treated as if the LC were unarmored, G12.674. In other words, the passengers, PRC, are all attacked by a general collateral attack, with no having of fire for being an armored target. You no doubt recall that initial scene in Saving Private Ryan when the ram on the LCVP goes down. Next, let's imagine that in another bunker nearby, a German 75L gun takes a shot at the LCVP, now at a range of only 6 hexes. If we again assume that a hit is achieved, what are our chances of inflicting more damage? Well, while we'll obviously find it easier to damage the vehicle, as rolling less than half the final TK number in this case will be a lot more likely, i.e., 75mm, basic TK, #= 17-0, armor factor, so we must roll less than 8 to cause damage. We still won't inflict any more than 1 DP, again, unless we get a critical hit. However, in each of the above cases, we might still do some damage to those aboard the LCVP. Depending on where we hit, we might affect either the LC crew, with a turret or upper superstructure hit, or the LC passengers, with a hull hit. If the crew is affected by such a collateral attack, the same effects DR is used with the He equivalency of 2 firepower, rule C 8.31, in the case of the 75mm, though not the MMG, which attacks with normal firepower, although with +2 DRM, for environment conditions. If the passengers are hit by the AP, not the MG, the same applies, although the firepower of the hit would be halved, as the LCVP is an armored target. We've also noted the fact that a high ROF weapon has a greater chance of hitting the LC more than once in a fire phase, thus conceivably causing much more damage. What about the artillery piece in the next bunker, firing 105mm He? This has got to do some damage, right? Well, it probably will. He is far more damaging to a LC and can have the effect of eating right into a LC's DP rating. When a He hit is achieved, assuming of course that a hit was obtained on using vehicle target type, you use the TK hashtag given in the C7.34 table. Against an armored target, a 105mm gun has a He TK hashtag of 10. If we subtract the front armor aspect of the LC, i.e., 0, we have to roll 9 or less to hurt it. Rolling 10 has no effect. Let's look at the LC destruction table again. Look at the third column, the He, vehicle target type, section. If we roll less than the modified to kill number, the damage points inflicted equals the final TK number minus the TK dice. If the TK number is 10, and we roll 8, then 2 damage points are inflicted. This thing's got some hitting power. Imagine, if we roll 6, the LCVP will go straight down. The same collateral attacks apply as above, but this time, the He will have far more hitting power. The crew will be hit with 20 FPE. With +2 crew, exposed dice roll modifier, if a turret hit has occurred, while a hull hit will strike the passengers, with 8 FPE, 105mm He equals 20 firepower heft, armored target, equals 10 firepower, down to 8 firepower column. Good Ichi firing ordnance is a godsend when defending against the Seaborne Assault. While those LC are in the water, such ordnance is your best defense. Let's now imagine that an 81mm mortar crew on the heights overlooking the beach decides to also try its luck against this hapless LC. OBA, or area target type weapons, also have a chance against poorly armored LC. In this case, if a hit is achieved, the rule C1.55 DRMs is used to resolve the hit, -1 for all armor factor less than 4, -1 for being open top, and if a Kia is achieved, the DP inflicted is equal to the Kia hashtag. Once again, The resulting collateral damage depends upon either a hull or a turret hit, and once again the passengers have any FP against them halved while in an armored LC. Note that any HE firing gun can also use the area target type. If the LC is unarmored, it is treated in most respects as an unarmored vehicle. You fire on it using the asterisk vehicle line on the IFTE if using small arms or machine gun, although in this if you inflict damage points equal to the asterisk vehicle kill number minus the effects dice roll. Remember that unless the LC is beached, you fire on it with half firepower, G12.61. If you are firing HE, the HE to kill number is often higher, although damage is worked out in the same way. The resultant hit to crew and passengers is far more damaging, as the passengers, being in an unarmored LC, won't have the incoming firepower have against them. A blaze occurs as long as 2 or more DPE are caused by an attack, and the colored DR is 1 on the original effects dice roll, G12.68. A blaze reduces the LC's MPE by 1, and in the advance phase, in each subsequent player turn, 1 extra damage point is inflicted. Passengers aboard the LC are still able to unload from it, although no unit may load onto a LC that is ablaze, Rule G12.44. The examples described above cover the most common ways of attacking LC. There are, of course, many variations and exceptions in this section of the rules, and you would be wise to explore what happens to vehicles/guns aboard an LC, for example, or how aerial attacks can affect the LC. Shooting from LC. In general, the LC is used to get from off-board ships to shore. They generally don't make very good attack craft and their fire is hampered in many ways. Although Rule E5.4 allows small arms/LMG fire from boat passengers, LC passengers are specifically prohibited by Rule G12.5 from attacking in any way. Those large machine guns aboard some of the LCM-3, for example, may prep fire only if the LC is fast aground. All the normal penalties for moving/motion/non-stop/advance fire phase apply. Normally, fire is quartered. Any stun DRM accumulated by the crew also apply to the shots they are taking. Alright friends, let's close this episode here where we review the ways of attacking amphibious vehicles and landing crafts. Despite the extensive review of the rules, it is impossible to exhaust this whole subject and it is highly recommended to read the rulebook, especially chapters GE, which deals with the Pacific Theater of Operations, more specifically, the assault on the beaches, and the chapter H, which deals with vehicles used in loading and unloading operations. In the next episode, we will deal with the maneuvers related to landing on beaches and the obstacles used to make landing difficult or even impossible. See you soon. Welcome friends to the third episode of this series of videos concerning seaborne assault situations using amphibious vehicles and landing crafts. In this episode, emphasis will be given to the mechanisms that govern issues associated with the disembarkation of passengers from these vehicles and the conditions under which this happens. Another important aspect to be developed will be the obstacles that can be used to prevent the success of landing operations, as well as the so-called seawalls. Finally, A brief summary of all aspects covered so far will be made at the end of the episode, with practical tips for use in amphibious attack situations. Enjoy! Beaching the LC. Beaching is declared in the movement phase as it enters any non-cliff land/water hex. If not declared as you enter, you must expend another MP to do so. Beaching can only occur during the advanced phase if heavy surf is in effect and only if it rolls less than or equal to 8 on a beaching dice roll, +1 for inexperienced, +1 steeply sloped hex, +1 another LC in the same ocean hex. If 9 or 10 LC becomes temporarily immobilized, TI, and switches from unbeached to beached, or vice versa. On a DR greater than or equal to 11, it immediately broaches, Rule G14.4421. Position the LC counter to straddle that hex site, but without changing its vehicular cover arc. A beached LC is still considered, for all purposes, to be in that water obstacle location. All dice rolls/dice rolls required by the presence of any beach obstacles in an ocean hex that is entered by a LC/boat, or within which a LC changes its vehicular cover arc, must be made prior to the beaching attempt, if any, for that LC/boat. Rule G14.57. Unloading from LC. When do you have to unload? Once a LC has beached, even involuntarily, all its passengers must attempt to unload as soon as possible. Rule G14.231. Whenever an immobilized LC/amphibian is in a location in which any of its passengers can unload, all who possibly can must attempt to unload as soon as possible, unless doing so would leave them with no path of enterable hexes to a hinterland hex. Unloading costs. The normal vehicle unloading rules apply to unloading from a LC. Because of this, a LC may only unload when it is stopped, Rule D6.5, and it is only stopped if it is in one of 6 situations. You have beached it across a hex site. If you have managed to get your LC beached, it will cost the LC passengers 25% FRU of their movement factors/movement points, plus cost of terrain, if a vehicle, to unload. These units may go across the beach hex site to the beach hex. If you've beached across an ocean/hinterland hex site, the hinterland hex site is considered higher terrain. In order to place your units in the hinterland hex, you have to double the cost of unloading to 50%, or add 4 MP, if a vehicle. If you've beached across a hex site not within your covered arc, you pay the same costs, but may only unload into the LC's hex. I can only think of one instance where this can occur. If heavy surf is in effect and the LC is spun by a stun result versus the crew, the LC could beach in the advanced phase, but not be facing the beach hexes. You have run aground in a shallow ocean hex. Your LC is now considered beached within that hex and is bogged. Since you must unload when beached, you've got no choice but to start unloading now. It will still cost 25% of the LC passengers' MF/MP to unload, but they are now placed within the LC's hex. You are fast aground in a shallow ocean hex. Your LC is now considered beached within that hex and is immobilized. The same costs apply as for a LC that is aground. You are immobilized in a shallow ocean hex. If the number of damage points the LC has received is the same as damage point rating, the LC is immobilized in its current hex. Only personnel and their possessed support weapons may unload and at a cost of 50% of their movement factors. Just like an aground LC, the units are placed in the LC's hex. A side note, LCs are not immobilized by a final to kill dice roll that is equal to the final to kill number like a normal vehicle would be using the rule C7.5 rules, see rule G12.602. The LC is destroyed in a shallow ocean hex. If the LC was already beached across a hex site, it remains beached across that hex site and units use the cost from option 1. If the LC was not beached across a hex site, it is considered fast aground and units use the cost from option 3. You are stopped next to a pier. If you expand a stop movement point next to a pier, personnel can unload at a cost of 50% of their movement factors. Place them on the pier. The 25% costs listed above are doubled to 50% if the LC does not have a ramp. Rule G12.41. But the costs already listed at 50% are not doubled to 100%. The normal loss of 1 movement factor for each 1/4 of the LC's movement points already spent still applies before unloading. Also note that while unloading, the LC does not count as a vehicle for the purpose of the rule D2.14 penalty of an additional movement points for each vehicle in the hex. Heavy surf will double all of the unloading costs listed above after applying any penalty for not having a ramp. There is a chart on the gung ho Chapter G divider that summarizes all unloading costs. Unloading vehicles. The above costs for unloading also apply to vehicles. There are a few additional rules to keep in mind when unloading vehicles. Remember that a LC may not carry vehicles unless it has a ramp, underline portage points. Vehicles pay a start movement point normally. If there is a wreck or immobile vehicle in the vehicle stack, no vehicles beneath it may unload until you remove it. Vehicles must unload in the top to bottom order of the vehicle stack. If the top vehicle does not unload, no vehicle, or 5 out of 8 counter in the infantry stack beneath it may. If there is a burning wreck in the vehicle stack, no vehicles beneath it may unload. There is no way to remove a burning vehicle from a LC, Rule G12.44. How does one remove a wreck from a LC? First, the LC must be beached to start the unloading process. Then, you first must unload all vehicles above the wreck apart from the last vehicle above the wreck, but only if this last vehicle is going to be used to help remove the wreck. Then, you use the normal rule D10.42 process to unload the wreck, which removes the wreck at the end of the movement phase using a track armored fighting vehicle, either directly in front of the wreck in the vehicle stack or directly behind it, and weighs at least 90% of the wreck's weight. The track AFV uses half of its movement points allotment to remove the wreck. Unloading guns. If no vehicles are aboard, a gun may be manhandled off a LC. Although the rules use the term manhandle, you don't really follow the rules for manhandling a gun. You use the rule C10.12 procedures for unhooking a gun from a towing vehicle to unload it from the LC. The LC spends half, fractions rounded up, of its movement points allotment, 2/3, if the manhandling number of the gun is circled, to unload the gun. The gun crew disembarks at no extra cost to the LC, but is temporarily immobilized, TI, in that hex. Note that this manhandling is the only activity units can perform that would delay their departure from the LC. All other activity that may delay debarking may not be attempted. Recall, getting out of Dodge. Once your valiant LC crew has delivered their passengers, it's time for them to hit the road. As soon as there are no passengers aboard who are able to unload by their lonesome, the LC is immediately recalled. Amphibians are recalled slightly differently. Each turn that it starts its movement phase in a hinterland hex, it must take a normal test check at some time during its movement phase, using the morale of the highest morale passenger. Failure of this normal test check results in immediate recall of the amphibian. If an amphibian is immobilized by an ESB breakdown or mechanical reliability failure, the crew must abandon it immediately. The passengers must unload as soon as possible. Once the amphibian is empty, it's flipped to its wrecked site. Units that have unloaded. In order to get your troops ashore, a few changes had to be made to the rules. While a shallow ocean hex is not a land hex, it is only considered a water obstacle to boats and LC. Rule G 13.4. As soon as infantry units unload into either a shallow ocean or beach hex, they are considered fanatic even before any defensive first fire can occur. Passengers, P or C, that unload from a LC into a shallow ocean hex are considered wading instead of fording. It will cost them 3 movement factors to enter a new shallow ocean hex, but it will not cost them the normal double MF to exit to the beach. Rule B 20.45, moving to higher terrain, because they are not considered in /IN a depression. Rule G 13.42. Infantry in a shallow ocean hex is also considered fanatic. Rule G 13.42. Unable to form a multi-hex fire group, inherent FP and light machine gun attacks, the only ones they can make are have as area fire. May not conduct close combat. Single man counter, may not direct fire. Immune to leader loss test check, leader loss morale check, and pin test check. Are not subject to any pin or heat of battle results. Break/stat reduction becomes casualty reduction instead. May not gain concealment. Have any he NDC attacks versus them. Should you drop anything in a shallow ocean location, kiss it goodbye, since it's gone. Vehicles in a shallow ocean hex are also considered wading. They add 1 land movement point to the cost of terrain, normally 2 land movement points, to enter another shallow ocean hex. They add 2 land movement points, instead of 1 to the cost of terrain, if not waterproofed. Subject to swamping, if not waterproofed. Rule G 12.4222. Receive an extra, +2 targets, base to hit dice roll movement. Infantry on the beach are fanatic. Note that if they become fanatic due to a heat of battle result, mark them with a fanatic counter, since they will stay fanatic even after they leave the beach. May not form multi-hex fire groups. Leader loss morale check is treated as leader loss test check instead. Heat of battle, berserk, and surrender is treated as battle hardening instead. Break/stat reduction becomes casualty reduction instead. Beach obstacles. What is a beach obstacle, you may ask? Any mine, tetrahedron, wire, or pangees. Normal hidden initial positioning and hidden initial positioning loss procedures apply to them. The ocean depth of a hex can change in a do-it-yourself (DYO) scenario, depending upon whether it is high tide or low tide, Rule G13.97. In a DYO scenario, as soon as play begins, check for any beach obstacle that may now be located in a deep ocean hex, or any hex it normally cannot set up in. Each such beach obstacle is immediately eliminated. Mines are the exception to this rule in shallow ocean. Anti-boat mines and anti-tank mines are automatically interchanged depending upon the type of hex they end up in. For the purpose of eliminating a beach obstacle, the applicable firepower of heat attacks are halved, apart from place/set demolition charges. Otherwise, all beach obstacles are eliminated in the normal manner. See the tetrahedron section for a few special rules regarding this beast. Mines. There are three types of mines: anti-tanks mines, anti-boats mines, AB, and anti-personnel mines, AP. Setup: AB and AD mines can be exchanged one for one. Shallow ocean hexes contain AB mines. Soft sand beach hexes or hard sand beach hexes next to a hinterland hex may contain AP mines. The same hex may not contain both Pangaeas and AP mines. Changes to the hex: none. Attacks by AB mines attack, just like AD mines, whenever entering or exiting the hex. Roll 1 die. If it is less than or equal to the number of factors in that hex, an attack occurs, using the procedure described in Rule B28.52. AB mines attack wading vehicles, just as if they were AD mines. AB mines will also possibly attack LC entering the location. Determine the possibility of an attack the same way in which AD mines attack vehicles. Heavy surf will add 1 to this dice roll. If it is determined that AB mines have attacked an LC, attack the LC by subtracting an original dice roll from 13 to calculate the number of damage points inflicted in the LC. All passengers, PRC, of the LC are attacked by a 16 firepower collateral attack. Armored fighting vehicles, and their PRC, whose lowest hull AF is greater than 0, are immune to this attack. If the portage points capacity of the LC is greater than or equal to 40, then use the rule G12.678 random selection to determine who is attacked in each of the infantry and vehicle stack. Tetrahedrons. There are two types of tetrahedrons. One with wire and the flip side without wire. Tetrahedrons setup. One tetrahedron may be placed in beach, shallow ocean, or reef hex. Changes to the hex: each hex with a tetrahedron is considered non-open ground. The cost of terrain is increased by 1 movement point, but no extra movement factors. Attacks by tetrahedrons only attack LC and only when the LC enters the hex, changes vehicular cover arc in the hex, or beaches. Make 1 dice roll, make per hex side change. If changing vehicular covered arc on a final dice roll of 2, the LC is destroyed, but the passengers survive without any collateral attack. If the final dice roll is less than 2, resolve an AB mine attack. If there happens to be AB mines already in the hex, 2 attacks may be made. There is a -1 dice roll modifier for heavy surf. Elimination of tetrahedrons can only be eliminated by a demolition charge or heat attack. If a vehicle enters a wire tetrahedron hex, the wire is eliminated normally, but the tetrahedron remains. Flip the counter over. Tetrahedrons with wire setup. Any beach hex that does not contain pangeas, plus any shallow ocean/reef hex containing tetrahedrons. Changes to the hex: none. Attacks by amphibians, treat same as wire in land hex. LC adds 1 to a ground dice roll, and wire is eliminated if color die on this roll is a 1. Elimination of normal, also on LC a ground DR. Pangeas setup. Any soft sand beach hex or a hard sand beach hex adjacent to at least one hinterland hex. The hex may not contain wire or mines. Changes to the hex: none. Attacks by normal. Elimination of normal. Victory points. Each LC eliminated is worth 1 victory points, VP, plus 1 VPE, for each of the following. 1 still functioning main armament weapon, being fully armored. Its inherent crew did not survive, each multiple of 50 pp, fraction rounded up, in its passenger capacity VPE, can also be awarded for units aboard the LC when it was eliminated. Note, a LC which exits carrying a blaze counter does not count for casualty or exit VP. Seawalls. A special scenario rule, SSR, may state that a seawall exists. If so, it will also indicate if it is a high or a low seawall. Note to designers, a seawall cannot be mandated along a steeply sloped beach rule, G13.6. If a seawall is designated by SSR, all beach hinterland hex sites will be considered seawall. Note that ocean hinterland hex sites are not considered part of the seawall. The high seawall is the easier of the two. Rules-wise, it is equivalent to a one-level cliff rising from the beach. It acts the same as all the other cliffs you are used to, except that the sneaky Japanese player may not put a cave-covered arc across this hex site. It would be too tough to eliminate, and only commandos may climb a high seawall. The low seawall is a little trickier. It is treated as a normal wall, but there are several exceptions. Infantry do not have to pay the extra movement factors to cross it. Vehicles may not cross it unless you manage to breach that baby. See British Vehicle Note 37 regarding the AVRA's ability to cross it. Like I said, it always helps to read Chapter H for anything in your order of battle before going into battle. Point that bazooka somewhere else. It is not a wall for the purposes of firing heat. Any unit in a hinterland hex with war advantage will only get +1 terrain effect modifier instead of +2 if it is hit by indirect fire. Line of sight, LOS, is not blocked except for units entrenched in the beach hex, which cannot see beyond the hinterland hex common to its own hex. While it does not block LOS, it can be a hindrance. A +1 hindrance applies only if the seawall hex site the LOS is crossing is not part of either the firer's or the target's hex. So, if you are going to get vehicles across this low seawall, how do you breach one of these babies? A dozer would be a nice start, since it clears it just like a roadblock. Any heat greater than 100 mm may also breach it, if it scores a clear dice roll on a hex, either side of the wall, random selection, if more than one hex site is a low seawall. A demolition charge set in a beach hex can also do it against a specified hex site by scoring a kill in action, clear, result. Once breached, movement across the hex site treats it like open ground, but the seawall is technically still there, so it will still negate any FFMO in the beach hex. Summary. D-Day, the Seaborne Assault. So what else do we need to know if we are conducting a seaborne assault or defending against one? We'll start with the attacker. The attacker in a seaborne assault needs to be aware of the following rules. If conducting a seaborne assault, each LC in the attacker's OBE must be filled to at least 1/2 RDS capacity, Rule G14.21. You don't need to stack your passengers on top of the LC counter. Use a cloaking box. That way, your opponent won't know where all of those good leaders are. Rule G14.23. When stacking your infantry and vehicles, remember that they must leave the LC in a certain order. Top to bottom of the stack is equivalent to front to back for this purpose. Rule G12.151. It would be a shame if a vehicle was destroyed by collateral attack and was in front of other vehicles on the same LC. Vehicle stacks can't be rearranged, however, infantry stacks can be, as if they were in open ground. Larger LC are less affected by collateral attacks. If a LC has a portage points, PP, greater or equals 40, collateral attacks affect only PLC chosen by random selections. Rule G12.678. Don't forget the implications of rules G12.13, G13.421, and G14.32. Some of these have already been mentioned. Your infantry will be considered fanatic while wading in shallow ocean, or while on the beach, but in all of these cases, and when they are on the LC, any break result will cause a casualty reduction. Also, while on a LC, everyone has the same morale level of 8, and no leadership modifiers apply. An American order of battle undertaking a seaborne assault may be able to use underwater demolition teams, UDT, Rule G14.561. These are represented abstractly by a number of dice rolls given to the US player and resolved after setup. The result of the dice rolls, totaled if more than one dice roll, is equal to the number of hexes the US player may declare as cleared of beach obstacles. Otherwise, such beach obstacles can only be cleared by demolition charge TC, Rule B26.51, or by HE, Rule B26.52. Unless placed or set, a DC used against a beach obstacle in a shallow ocean hex has its FP heft. The defender, too, has a few tricks up his sleeve. When setting up, be aware that while you can't set up your forces in beach or shallow ocean hexes, Rule G14.21, you can bore sight such locations, Rule G13.45. When facing a seaborne assault, don't forget the previously mentioned implications of the LC destruction table. Large caliber guns should fire HE, while small caliber guns, with high rate of fire, should be used to fire AP, Rule G12.62. When firing at LC, be aware of Rule G13.46. A LC is considered to have been in line of sight for 4 movement points, MP, before entering the map. It hasn't expanded such MP. Instead, this rule demonstrates the assumption that the defenders didn't just suddenly see a LC, they might have been tracking it for some time. They've thus had time to aim and avoid C6 cases, J1 and 2. Also, the first time a defending gun fires at an LC in the game, it can apply the -1 acquisition DRM immediately. Don't forget this. Let's not forget the array of beach obstacles with which you might be blessed. A tetrahedron, G14.51, attacks a LC whenever the one enters, beaches, or changes vehicular cover up in its hex, with a single dice roll. A dice roll of 1 hits the LC, with an anti-boat, AB, mine. A dice roll of 2 destroys the LC, but with no collateral attack. Any other result has no effect. There is a -1 dice roll modifier when heavy surf is in effect. An AB mine can be set up in shallow ocean and is detonated much like a normal AT mine. When it is detonated, a dice roll is made, and then subtracted from 13. The difference is the amount of damage points inflicted on the LC. A 16 firepower collateral attack affects all PRC. Wire and Pangees might also be available. Wire can actually affect the LC's aground dice roll, so it can be used to try and force LCs to unload in shallow water, thus slowing the unloading PRC, who will be forced to wait, subjecting them to more possible casualty reductions. There are a few notable scenarios which feature seaborne assaults. Scenarios Hell and High Water and Bloody Red Beach, while ASL Annuals 93A and 95 give us scenarios The Cat Has Jumped and Migrate. Of course we can't forget that Blood Reef Tarawa is one big seaborne assault, and ASL Annual 93B gives us the famed Gavutu Tanambogo campaign game, re-released in the Combined Pacific Module Rising Sun. Most of these scenarios and or campaign games feature American forces, often Marines, against Japanese defenders, although occasionally other situations arise. Heavy surf appears quite often, and many Allied invasions feature an assortment of amphibious vehicles, arid LC. When conducting the assault, remember that your main aim is to get your troops to shore as quickly and as safely as possible. This was the aim of any amphibious operation. Once on the beach, invading forces could take the fight to the enemy the way they knew best. As a defender, your job is to stop the enemy from getting to you in the first place, or to hurt him while he is at his most vulnerable, i.e., while in the water or on the beach, the transitional part of the operation. Very well friends, at this point Jim ends this episode, where themes related to the assault on beaches in the universe of Advanced Squad Leader were discussed. As highlighted at the beginning of this series, Jim will address issues necessary to carry out the Gavutu Tanambogo campaign of the Rising Sun module. The next few episodes should address the fortifications and fighting conditions during the night. Hope seeing you soon. Namaste.